how do you use your broader social network of followers and community to inform how you develop your work?
We have members in Western Europe, in London, in Amsterdam. I'm in New York. Somebody else is in Newfoundland. Somebody else is in Toronto. Somebody else is in Vancouver and San Francisco and Chicago. So depending on where the event is in the real world that we all have to be in, somebody's going to have to be awake at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
So it's like, because we're doing these as a collaborative and we're globally based because we can be. This would be absolutely impossible in real life to get to get 8 people from all over the world to be able to go to Donauwörth, unless we had like an incredible backer. But we can all do that within Second Life and Machinima. We can all arrive and go in there and be and participate. But then at the same time, we have issues with the technology itself.
Well, the community is important, but of course also the result is important. I can't really separate it. Yes, it's a live production, and you work with a community of artists, and then the audience kind of also becomes part of a community if it's only just for a few seconds or an hour or a few hours. But the art doesn't exist without the community. If we're invited in an existing festival, then the audience comes with the festival. And if we organize an online event, we try to announce the event and get people to know that actually something is happening. But sometimes we do events for really a selected group of people, personal invitations of people.
Has your work been picked up beyond the immediate community of interest?
For the most part, we invite people in, to participate and have fun and view the second front performances, but by and large, they're really gallery pieces. So I would say that there is the online community, of social media, that watches it. There's this curator by the name of Lee Wells in New York that really supports us a great deal, and he put us in a show with Cao Fei and Jeremy Blake at the Contemporary in Moscow. Second Front, has actually bled into the mainstream art world in ways that the Matas did as well, but much less better paying. But let's see here. So I think I get a little bit surprised, when the mainstream art world, the museum and gallery crowd, pick up second front work. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that feels like, I shouldn't, because it's very art historically grounded, and and follows a very tight line of the development of performance arts since 2005.
How do you know that the audience you have for your work actually values it?
I think my work, it probably isn't really valued by the Machinima community at all. I don't think it's artistic enough, to be honest. But it is valued by language teachers. I can only tell by likes and sharing it on Facebook and things like that, where it appears in language communities. I've seen a few of them played around Second Life at various different events. One was played on Fantasy Fair, and one was being played somewhere else I went the other day. Because we're dealing with a global audience, we're getting a lot of interesting culture, the differences between culture, and of course they can be portrayed in a machinima for educational purposes really well. So people coming forward saying, will you do this and will you do that, and have you thought about doing this? So the ideas that they're coming forward with for lessons is quite interesting. It's still a very new field, machinima in language learning, but it is beginning to get interest, there's no doubt.
When I used to make my flight sim movies, they were mostly based on World War II aviation battles and history. Again, that's just combining my love of games with my love of World War II history. But quite a few of these films made their way to the people who were actually involved in these actual events, or their family. I did one film about Raymond Baxter, who used to fly Spitfires in World War II, the old Tomorrow's World presenter. He was still alive when I sent the film to him. So he had that. He really appreciated that and sent me a lovely letter about it. And then I made a film about some of the Australians who took part in World War II, who were based at Lichty in Scotland. Mm-hmm. And that film was picked up by the sons of the pilots, and through them contacting me, I could then pass on these people's contacts to the sons of other pilots who flew in these stories. So by using the games medium to tell these stories and people pick up on it, it's attracting people who had nothing to do with gaming, nothing to do with Machinima, but they found these stories online through the Machinima that I made.
We already have an audience, we already have a place. And then our Machinima, as I said, is largely sort of our document of our performance, which is its own art as well, and then becomes performative. So then our Machinima, we might be called to do a live performance at a museum somewhere from Second Life. Somebody's there in actual time, in actual place. Everybody else is all around the world, and then and a Machinima is generated from that performance. Well, that Machinima will then be asked to be a part of a festival of experimental film, or Machinima, or performance art somewhere else. Or another of us who is going to do a performance of our own may take Machinima of our group performances along with us and show them as part of our presentation, or as part of our gallery exposition. If we go back to the history of Fluxus in internationally and in New York, we had the great, everybody, abstract expressionism was the rage in New York, and they had the uptown galleries were full of these super blue chip artists, who were making the top dollar, and they were completely uninterested uptown in anything that any of the new people were doing downtown. Like they didn't want their abstract expressionism, they didn't want anything they were doing, they weren't interested in, because they had their artists who were making big money and the scene was locked down. So those artists downtown got to do anything and everything at all. And so we give rise to all kinds of crazy things like happenings, intermedia, Fluxus, and what we know now as performance art, and all these other really wild, wonderful experimentations that couldn't exist if they had had a marketplace that they had to go and dance, dance and juggle and play to.
Do you work in a collaborative approach, or are you mainly sort of a solus artist?
I would say to start with, there's a tremendous collaboration has to happen at a very macro level with Linden Labs, how they've decided to set up, as Tony mentioned, all of a sudden changing terms of reference and that sort of thing. So there's this constant sense of I wouldn't call it nervousness, but just awareness that I'm pretty dependent on a corporation or a company that I know nothing about and have no impact on. So that's sort of the macro level of collaboration that I'm very aware of. And then the second level is very personal, in that other artists and friends will help me out. And we would do, say, a performance together in Second Life.
When we started off, Chantal and I was putting forward as a director and a writer, putting forward the idea of having a team very similar to in real world. That seemed to make a lot of sense. As time went by, we found out a couple of things. First of all, it's incredibly difficult to organise people that are volunteers inside Second Life. They have different schedules, different times because of their countries and the zones they live in. So that became a major problem. The second time round, we found that we needed to film a lot more times, repeatedly, to get it right, because we're literally on a learning curve. And you can't really do that when you've got other people, especially when you've got actors. So what we did is we developed a short team where they can actually do the work outside of the scope of filming. So the actual filming and operating the avatars was done by us. And we used robots, in actual fact, to do a lot of the work. Or I would move the 3 or 4 avatars at the same time and work it that way. And then the music could be done by an outsider, which we of course had, and so on.
The community is of course the project, and what we are producing Machinima for now at the moment is for using Machinima in a language teaching. So we have a lot of teachers, international teachers from Poland, Czech Republic and UK, Germany and Turkey, and they all try out Machinima in the language classroom, and all different kinds, for, let's say, grammar or intercultural issues and things like that. So this is a big community, so to speak, and Machinima making for, filmmaking for language classes has always been very important on filmmaking or films. But the point with Machinima is that they're easy to produce and at low cost. And our aim there is to have actually students make their own films, create their own films, which is easy to do in virtual worlds. And the aim is that this motivates and enhances language teaching. And I mean, you cannot pre-produce so many films that might be needed because you don't know what you need in the classroom.
I only show in art galleries, and the art community doesn't. Well, it's such a diverse. There's many communities within the art community, so if I'm in the right gallery and talking to the right segment of that community, then there's an understanding of what I'm doing, or maybe even an appreciation for the difficulty of it. But I would say that outside of a very particular group within a group, the art world does not tend to value Machinima, and that's a gross generalization.